Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. I am already on the backup system. The other one has failed 3 times already, so so let's hope the backup is. Welcome everybody on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is part of the North American teachings, and we're trying to condense the teachings of over 6,000 hours on the Kesh Foundation private teaching and public teaching classes, and so we're trying to deliver this information in a more concise manner, and consider the fact that we've probably only scratched the surface. Maybe less than 7% of the population is familiar. We see that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. So thank you all for participating today and making this such a powerful meeting. It isn't just the North American participants. It's everyone from around the world who's coming here to support. That's what makes this meeting so strong. And I appreciate all of you being here. And some of you, it's very late in the evening. So let us begin. This is the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We are in the process of doing reviews of previous classes. We're in the Advanced Earth Space section. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is October the 15th, 2023. This is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So we're trying to figure out the role of man, and we have to understand what is the difference between universal made and man-made. And we all have an angle. And the thing is that a lot of us are very happy to live with old technology because it's comfortable and it's familiar and it's a lot slower paced. But the thing is that over the years, we've through the help of history, learned a lot of lessons. But are we using those lessons? And that's one of the reasons that's causing us to have this hesitancy to move forward, as described in Marantavical Kesh in the books. Book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation and of Matter. And book number 2, The Structure of Light. And then book number 3, The Origin of the Universe. And we have to understand that there are many more books to follow. And we still haven't learned the basic lessons of 1, 2, 3. As we're trying to search for outer space and to understand what it means so that we can get on this plasma highway. But in order to do that, we have to have our embodiment of Art of the Pie in the sky. And we have to understand what that means. And at what speed, what rate of change, and what vehicle that we use. And so sometimes we go to the doctor and we want to get a blood test. And Hopefully most of us pass. And now we've been doing preliminary soil transportation tests. And the good news is that most of us have passed. So this is what's been going on now. It's in terms of what we started in the month of October of 2023. But we find that we're going back to 2022. We're going to an era where before then we had to understand the cups of life and why they were important and what they meant. And especially we had to understand that they weren't the cups of the pandemic. They represented our inner space, our emotional strength. And this is the key message. So as we get into the advanced Earth space, and we say, why are we worried about Earth space so much when we're trying to learn about outer space? And the thing is that we can't seem to differentiate between Earth space and outer space, because Earth space is very physical space. And of course, that stands to reason because it's our home. And of course, as man space, we're also very physical. So we need to understand the characteristics of what it means to be physical so that we can understand the difference. And this is a really, really tough lesson to learn because all of us have learned the lessons of Earth space. And for many of us, that has been the only space. And so we talk about this history and how we're trying to condense thousands of hours into a few hours. So here we are in the review series, trying to condense another 15 hours down to a matter of an hour or two, if we can. Because, not because we're running out of time, it's because people are not devoting the time that it takes to get things done. We respect our legends, but we don't understand the earth upheaval, worlds of collision, what it means to be gravitational, what is a cargo cult, and what is the broadcast. And so let's delve right into it. So we find that as we're searching for outer space and looking through these three books, we think one is the source and one is our soul, and there's a link in between, but maybe our soul is the source and our little universe, man's universe, that little tiny red dot in the bottom right hand corner, it is a red dot because it's a hot zone, conflict zone. And maybe this is what we've been looking for, that little piece of spinning pie in the sky. And we seem to ignore the rest. And so we're always looking for this extremely small scheme in this grand scheme. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? And so our focus really is on these basic dimensions. And so if we look at a flat surface, we find there are two feeding dimensions. But if we look at a spherical dimension, we find there are three feedback dimensions. And since we're the observer, we're in a fourth dimension. We're none of those three dimensions. So you have to leave that dimension to be able to look at that dimension. So you can't be in that dimension. It's like being a spectator to a football game. You sit in the stands. You don't sit on the field because you're part of the audience. If you're on the field, then you are part of the teams on the field. So this is the point of view we have to understand. So right now we're in Earth space and we're viewing our Earth space. But how does that compare to near space or far space? And how does that compare to our dream world? And then we said, well, which is book number 1 or which is book number 3? Yeah, which is the launch point and which is the landing point? And obviously a landing point becomes another launch point, doesn't it? And does the landing point have to go back to the original launch point, or does it go to another landing point? And so all these questions come into mind, but how do we know where we're going? Because we only have the 2 points, the launch point and the landing point, and then there's us in between. So something's not working here. Is there another guiding hand that's at play here? Or are we looking at these launch points and landing points from the wrong point of view? Because let's face it, the ultimate point of view is your point of view. And so this is the thing, as we're going through these uncharted skies, we are all students. Even the teachers become students. So, and the students have to learn from the teacher, but who does the teacher learn from? And so when we're looking at outer space, we find that there is a special teacher, the moral leader. And we always ask, well, can you hear it, or can you see it? Or can you make your positioning choices? Can you sort it out? Can you get elevated? How do we navigate this rough road? So we have to tune in. We have to tune into that moral leader. Turn on to the energies of the universe, because that's the most powerful. And drop out of our resistance, our self-serving resistance, which is limiting our evolution, because we're still searching for that phantom pie in the sky. And what is that phantom thing? It's something that's apparent to the senses, but has no substantial existence. And so if we only believe what we see, or what we touch or feel, with our hands that is, then how can we accept the existence of something that we can only sense? And yet, we have these satellites that go around this planet, and sometimes they become spaceships. So are we dream satellites? Is that what we are? Or are we our own spaceships? Or is this body that we're in, is this the dimension on this Earth space? Is that the reality dimension? And then we always have to ask ourselves, what time is it? And why do we need to know what time it is? Because in outer space, there is no time. So it's only here that we have time. So we try and keep track of time. And we can use cuckoo clocks, or we can use astrological ages. And it's funny because clocks have 12 hours. And they generally, in a day, go around twice. But in astrological ages, they're measured in years. 2,160 years. That's a very big clock. But if you divide that by 6, you get 360 degrees. And so one rotation goes through 360 degrees. And so that may be kind of confusing when we're just looking at clocks, but calendars are even more confusing, and they're based on legends. So the year has 365 days, and we've broken that up into 12 months. But not every month has the same number of days. And then one month has an extra day every leap year. And is that leap year that pie in the sky that we're looking for? So this is all based on legends. And those legends are based on continental legends. And so we have the 7 continents, but then we also have another 2 continents that we keep talking about. We don't really understand that because it's way, way, way in the back of history, mainly Lemuria and Atlantis. So, how do we understand this history? Well, we come to this anomaly, and it's in our art, it's in our clothing, and it's in our rugs, Persian rugs. And you say, well, Persian rugs have a very decorative appeal. So Persian rugs come from the Middle East. But these exact same patterns are found in Middle America. How is it possible that from that ancient culture, which compared to today's modern world, we accept as being primitive, is able to have the same artwork on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean? How is that possible? Either the thought crossed the ocean, or the artist crossed the ocean, or there was no ocean, there was a land bridge. And then there was an ocean. See, there were a lot of changes because in the beginning, there were no planets, there was no atmosphere, there was no water. And so we have this universe, and then there's this sun. And so, somewhere from the beginning to now, we are here. So, what happened in between? So, obviously, in our solar system, the sun came before Mercury. And then from there, we had other things follow. So, this was all part of the creation of the universe. The universe exists from energy, which is a charge in motion. So, it's always positive. So, the positive charge is not the motion charge. The positive charge is the direction. And so when all these things come together, and you see the 3 dimensions come together, and so clearly you're none of those 3 dimensions. And those 3 dimensions came together from a source, and that source could have come from any dimension. And so we have to understand that all things are in combination. And you, as the observer, are none of these dimensions. So where do we fit in? And how do we get here? And then we have this big vacuum in outer space, what we refer to as outer space, which is really in between space. It's not outer space, it's outer Earth space. But this vacuum is full of principal matter, and this energy is transcending this space, and it's always in motion. This is the plasma field transaction currency. And since it's energy, it's a plasma fuel. And so if we understand this, if we understand how the energy comes from the sun to the earth, then we understand that there's more to life than what we've been learning up until now. And so this is all involving a plasma interaction. So this is where the infinity loop comes in, because all things are in combination. And so when you take 2 things, there has to be a relationship. So one is a magnetical pushing, and the other is a gravitational pulling. And when you're in balance, that's a mag-grav condition. but it's not completely in balance, because if it was totally in balance, then it would move. And since energy is always in motion, and we can see how things are moving. So when we look at the Keshe model of the nuclear decay of the neutron, we see how rays are launched. They launch from one dimension, which is from the neutron to the atom. And so we see the neutron as being an individual initial fundamental plasma, and is comprised of three matters, and then breaks down into an atom, which is a marriage between electrons and protons, each of which is a combination of three matters. And then there's this decay process in the middle, which is called the release of the PM ticks. These are the rays that are traveling through that vacuum of outer space. So when we look at the atom, it has a particular characteristic. It has a proton and an electron, and these are, shall we say, a marriage made in heaven, and they work together. So the speed of rotation of the electron is dictated by the amount of the magnetic fields, which are transferred from the larger twin plasma of the proton. So these two are working together. So you see, this is the fundamental principle of the twinity. So we have the solar system and we have the universe. So from those two, other planets are created, and they come one by one, and another one, and another one. And, so the sun came before Mercury, and then came Venus, then came Earth, then came Mars. And then legend says that the next came Tiamat, and legend says Tiamat was blasted to smithereens. Lots of little bits, itty bitty bits. And so that becomes what we call the asteroid belt. And so all of the planets have positioned themselves, and they're location specific. And they all follow a path, a rotating field around the sun. And all of these fields are overlapping. And each one of these fields is created from the combination of three dimensions. So the manifestation of each one of these planets is none of these three dimensions. Because the planets are an observation as well. You stand on one planet, you could see another planet. Obviously, if you stand on another planet, you could see the first planet. So, seeing is believing. So those planets had to be created. And that, what created it, was this hidden guiding hand. And then on that planet, we have these other elements. And they too were all created the same way. But because they're physical, it's no longer manifestation. It's a different kind of manifestation, a materialization. And this materialization is also location specific. And so we find that there's copper in Chile, and gold in Indonesia, and oil in the Middle East. And, it's located very specifically, and it's not blended, even though the Earth is rotating. So there is a hidden hand that is positioning that. And this is part of our Earth space. So all of this came from outer space, you see, because outer space is not a place. That's the reality dimension. Outer space is a method of energy transfer. And so this energy is always in motion. And so what we're seeing is the manifestation, or shall we say the landing point, right? So there's some launch point, we don't know where it is, and it has to cross over through this vanishing confirmation point to come to this landing point. And it's true of everywhere, because The sun doesn't just shine on Earth, but it shines all around. So it is shining always into some space. What we're looking at is our verification, which is part of the transmission, and our validation, which is part of the transition. And so that gives us a target to shoot for, our point of existence, and to get here in what we call transmutation. So, as we said, a balanced maggrav is invisible, but it is existing as a field. So, it has to cross over from that transmutation point, crossing over that vanishing point to become visible. So, that visibility is the physical reality. The non visible reality is the plasmatic reality. And so, failing to understand the transcendence going from the plasmatic reality to the physical reality exemplifies our soul limitations. And so we have to transcend those soul limitations. Because beyond Earth space is our space. That's our point. We're looking at it from our point of view. And so within us, we have this dynamic plasma state, which is our soul, and we have this physical state, which is our bodies in our environment. And then, of course, we are affected emotionally by that. But there's two emotions. One is the emotion that our souls are giving, and one is the emotion that our environment is giving. And so there's a convergence. And so, what is your point of view? And how do we deal with this? So, these are all the skills that we have to learn. And that's exactly where we're at. We're the students in this whole thing. And then we have a whole slew of other students who will be coming and are desperately wanting to find out the answers. And we're in a position to provide the answers by circumstance. And that circumstance is that we're learning about plasma. And so we have to help the new students to understand what is plasma. So let's define it. It's a kind of energy state. And we have to understand that there are different energy states. Energy states are higher and energy states are lower. It all depends on your point of view. And today we're looking at the energy state of our Earth space, because Earth space is fundamental for our place of our inner space. And so between this Earth space and this inner space of our space, there has to be the key to the gateway to outer space. And this is what life is about. It's the most important thing in our life. And if that's not important, well, then nothing's important. We just have to understand the plasma rules. And these are different from the way we operate in our society, where the energy states, they increase or decrease by an order of magnitude. That's significant. The higher energy states feed the lower states. That's significant. And these energy states change and manifest through natural creation or natural decay. But there's another transfer state, and that is the catalytic or non-consuming energy transfer state. And that's represented by our sun. So that's significant. And then we find, well, when we get into higher plasma states, we can transfer the energy by many orders of magnitude. So this is significant as well. So you have an increase in energy state by an order of magnitude, and then the rate of change also changes by an order of magnitude. So you have a multiplication of orders of magnitude. And this is happening in our Earth space. I'm just thinking about the policeman who gives you a speeding ticket for going over the speed limit. Imagine if you went orders of magnitude over the speed limit, and then you multiplied that by orders of magnitude. So we find that plasma has two characteristics. It absorbs fields and is also barrier fields. But there's a decision-making process in this plasma, you see. It's bound to the ethos of the universe. And this is another significant thing that we have to understand. And so we keep talking about relationships because we're trying to seek a balance. It seems the more we talk about relationships, the more relationships seem to break up, because the scientific community has one responsibility and the spiritual community has a different responsibility, and the two can't seem to come together. So it's up to the plasma science really to add to the knowledge and bring this into balance. It's the rate of change that comes into question. So we don't want to be in an adversarial position. We want to be in a position of coexistence between this earth space and our inner space, to understand the difference between the awake state and the dream state. And so this is where science meets the soul of man for peace. And you know that is true, because it's very hard to go to sleep when your beds are burning. And we've come here purposely, on target. But within that target, we have many places. And so these are all part of Earth's target ranges. And they don't just go whether it's on the land or on the sea or under the ground or in the air, but it goes right up to the moon, because the moon rotates around the Earth, and that's also part of our space. And so the difference in what is the factor here, it has to do with the gravitational relationship. And so we find that that is based on density. So the more dense the field, the closer we get to the core of the Earth space. We'll talk about that more. But we seem to have a problem understanding our emotions. So as we looked in the past, and then we look in the future, and we try and find our position in the present. And so we say, well, the past and the history leads to the present. And then from our position in the present, it leads to the future. A lot of people don't think that way. The only future we have is based on the resolutions of the past. But is it a resolution or is it a continuation? In other words, when we make a mistake, do we learn from those mistakes? When we have a history, do we repeat that history because we didn't learn our lessons? And so this is what keeps us anchored. But anchored in the past, not in the future. We need to be anchored because we're part of this earth space until we decide to be part of something else. And so each of us is going through a transformation between the soul of the man and the soul of the body. And each of us is independent, and each of us is unique. So we're all independent variables, but we're dependent on the feedback of our earth space. And so some of us are following the wrong rules. And we see that the cross of the double cross is our eternal burden, which puts us right at the gates of hell. And say, well, we have to have a feeding choice and facilitating energy binding. Yes, yes. Energy binding is what brings the field together. It's part of the manifestation point, but do we have to do this at the expense of others? And do we have to strive to achieve success in stealing from others do we have to enhance our capabilities in lying and cheating, incorporating a double cross? That's only 2 times. It's not an order of magnitude. It's just drawing from the lowest energy. And so we forget that our soul vision is disconnected from our launch pad. We're just sitting on our landing pad, and we don't know where we came from, and we don't know where we're going. And many of us have given up. We don't care. And then just to make sure that we don't care, there's this disconnect that comes in from our environment. And so we get this continual feedback 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And yes, we spend a lot of time on Sundays, but what we're discussing is something that's very important, because it's our understanding in how we provide the pattern is how we get the energy. So it's not the energy that's important. It's how we open up to the energy of the universe and allow it to come in and yield to its glow and receive the benefit. This is the pattern we have to provide. And then we will get the energy, not double, but orders of magnitude, and get the energy flowing. So we're still self-serving, but then also the enhancement of others. And guess what? We benefit from their enhancement because they in turn do the same. So this is how energy is always in motion. The higher the negative charge, the higher the flow. Negative gives, positive takes. And the energy can be flowing or it can be binding. So when we look at the binding energy, we find that we have the existence of the maggrav. But when it's flowing, then we create a maggrav that is based on interaction. In both cases, it's energy in motion, and in both cases, it's a two-way street. So this is what's important. And then we can differentiate not only between earth space, inner space, and outer space, but then we understand that energy itself comes at different energy strengths. So we said that plasma is a kind of energy. And so let's look at the energy sequencing, and we see the soul of the man, the soul of the body, plasma, nuclear science, atomic energy, electromagnetic energy, electric and magnetic. And these are all in sequences based on strength. And so when we look at this planet and how we interact with Earth space, we could clearly see, we're bottom feeders. So now I understand how we're looking for the greater oneness, this common good, right? Which comes from our feeding radiance, and this is the feedback radiance that we seek. So it all comes together for the greater oneness. And after 295 seminars in a row, one nation, one planet, one race for world peace, we're still looking for world peace. And we're still talking about it. Not understanding that we're the magnetical residue between the attraction and repulsion forces, which we call gravitational and magnetical plasma forces of convergence and divergence, where each one of us is an independent variable. But we can reach the interdependent universe because it is interdependent. We depend on that universe. we can't blow it up to smithereens. And each one has to teach one the emotional transformation and the benefits of one nation, one planet, and one universe. Not to be unipolar, but multipolar in interdependent uniqueness. And yet we have this constant earth upheaval. And look at the calendar. We're talking about December the 11th of 2022. So it wasn't too long ago. And we're still looking for this phantom pie in the sky. But the thing is, whose story do we believe? And where did all this water come from? Isn't that why the picture is murky? Right? Because when we look at his story, that date given was January the 1st. The year nothing, zero. But that was the crossover between BC and AD. And we're just still trying to understand the difference between AC and DC. But when we talk about these major events, all of us talk about the Great Flood. And they talk about the Red Sea parting, the loss of Atlantis and the loss of Lemuria. How can we talk about a loss if it's gone? And then there's this ice age. And then, of course, the key point in Babylon. And another one in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And another one in Hiroshima, Japan. These are major events in our history. And we see them in books in our libraries. These are the houses of knowledge. And, one of the most famous libraries was in Alexandria. And some went there to read the books of knowledge, and some went there to burn the books of knowledge. Same thing happened in Basra in Iraq not too long ago, 20 years ago. And then, of course, some of the books, if you do heat them, they become clay tablets. And then, of course, the most famous book, Tao Te Ching, the most read book in the world. Some people think it's the Bible, but it's not. It doesn't even come close. And then, of course, there's the encyclopedia, and then in modern terms, we have this Wikipedia. But then we have this other thing called the Akashic Records, which seems to be all of the above combined. And it's interesting, we talk about Basra, and you look at this Iraqi librarian, Baker, and they saved 30,000 books from destruction during the Iraq War. And I read about this in the local newspaper. The article was one column by 2 fingers high. And I was trying to figure out, why would the military attack a library? The good news is this library was rebuilt in 2004. So the history is written by the winner, right? But we have ways of understanding history because the history comes in different languages. And we need language, right? But not always speak the same language. So if you want to put all the letters in the alphabet, you could put them into a sentence. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy sleeping dog. Or you could put them in sequence, A, B, C to Z. Or you can scramble them like you have on Remington typewriters. Qwerty. Or you can sort it out with the Rosetta Stone, where you have three languages engraved in that of a stone. And if you read one, you can translate the other. And this stone is in the British Museum in London. And then there's this other book written by Zachariah Sitchin, The Lost Book of Enki. Now, what is that? So we find that there are ancient scholars. They look at these books and look at the clay tablets, and then we have these modern scholars, we call them web surfers. And then in the middle, we have authors like Sitchin or Velikovsky. They wrote the book Earth Upheaval. And so these books tell us things. They talk about the Anunnaki and the planet Nibiru and the father Anu and the two sons, Enki and Enlil. One was a geneticist and one was a warrior, and they all had shields. The geneticist had a shield of an eagle, and the warrior had a shield of a snake. And there were claims of superiority. But when was this? And so we have to look at the history and figure out what time it is. And one of the greatest monuments are the pyramids. And these pyramids are in Mesopotamia. And we already talked about Middle America. We've seen the Aztecs and their artwork. And then Mesopotamia is in the Middle East. But that refers to the Sumerians, whoever they were. And then we have this Sphinx on the body of a lion. And we can clearly see the marks on the body that reflect erosion, historical erosion. But then we have this other clock, the zodiac. And we find that Leo is one of the members of the zodiac, Leo, the lion. Because they take the zodiac and divide it into 12 equal signs. And the era was between 10,350 BC and 10,450 BC. And even Edgar Cayce, in his book, refers to it in the Akashic Records. And then there were these Babylonians who invented the zodiac. And as Velikovsky was trying to understand the calendars, he wrote the book Earth Upheaval, and he tried to align the calendars, and he found that there was a 700-year difference. But is it 700 years forward, or is it backward, or is it somewhere in between? And so, let's face it, everyone has a neighbor. So let's compare the history of the neighbors. And we found very interesting things. And we had to move the calendar to align the neighboring histories. Isn't that strange? Why would one neighbor have a different history and a different timeline from the other neighbor? And then an astounding thing came to the forefront and did the pole split. Because we had two sons. And so the question was brought up last time. We look at this wobble interaction that we have on Earth, where we have these two poles, the North Pole and the magnetic pole. And we find that the energy in motion is a two-way street. And we have two hemispheres, but the Earth rotates in one direction. And so this wobble is only slight. But what if there was a sudden upheaval? What if this thing wobbled 90 degrees? And what if instead of coming back, it just kept on going and flipping over? Because when you look at the planets, the continents on the planet, and you find that they're not exactly balanced. They're somewhat balanced, but they're not totally balanced. And of course, there's water in between, which flows. So we want to look at some toys that may be instructive. And so as kids, we had a chance to play with spinning tops and with slinkies. And let's see how that works. So we can see that the spinning tops, when they're lying still, they're horizontal. But if we were getting them spinning, they would position themselves in a vertical position. And sometimes they would wobble, and sometimes they'd make a clattering on the floor. Sometimes they just do perpendicular spinning, but then they'd always stand up vertically. But if you're really skillful, you could completely flip them over. And you can watch them flip over. And is this what accounts for the sunrise reversal? Yes, we all know the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west. But Velikovsky found evidence where the opposite was true. And so there was a different physical spinning. Was that the cause of the earth upheaval? Was that the cause of the flooding? Or was there something else? Was it possible that worlds collided? Or was it possible that both happened? And so what happens if worlds will collide? Well, they might break up. So they might position themselves differently and cause themselves to reposition. Or maybe the poles will flip. Or maybe this is how Tiamat got destroyed and created that asteroid belt. So maybe it's like a game of billiards. Rotating fields collided and created a different pattern. So we all know we had a flood, and of course, in the Lost Book of Enki, our hero was Utnapishtim. We know him as Noah and his ark. He was given secret instructions, but not directly, because if he was given instructions directly, that would have been a violation of an oath. So he had to hide behind the curtains and eavesdrop. And he was given instructions on how to do some genetic selection. What? Way back then? And isn't it funny, in his genetic selection, he didn't select any dinosaurs or woolly mammoths. Unfortunately, all he had to worry about was the land. He didn't have to worry about the seas because of the Great Flood. Whales and giant squids lived in the seas. And maybe that's why these whales and giant squids are so large, like dinosaurs, because they were able to, shall we say, survive the flood. But how did they know about this genetic selection? Was it in those Persian rugs? Or should we say, was the knowledge in those Atlantean rugs? And did this artwork reflect the seasons, the 4 seasons? And did this artwork show us the DNA and the RNA and the interaction? And was this knowledge in the Middle East or in Middle America or both? So maybe we find that there's stuff in the Bermuda's Triangle which will help us find Atlantis, because there are foreign artifacts there in the Atlantic. Or is the Atlantic Gulf Stream showing us the residue from what happened? Or what about the hurricane paths, which seem to come from the deserts in Africa and cross the ocean and deposit in a range from Brazil and North America, and then seem to follow those currents? And when we look at a map of the deserts around the world, it's interesting that most of the deserts are next to a body of water. Isn't that strange? But these bodies of water are salt water. And so maybe that's why things don't grow there. But then when we look in these Mayan symbols and we see, well, wait a second, there's the four seasons. Oh, and there's the DNA. Oh, and there's the PM takes interaction. And then we also have Pacific Ocean anomalies. We have these straight lines. Are they just underwater airports? Or were they land-based airports? And then they sank? Or was this Lemuria? And how come you have these water erosion marks? And how come this lion body has a human head? Which part of the zodiac is that? Is that the time when the pyramids were built? Or is that the time when the Sphinx was vandalized? And so this has put a lot of limitations on us understanding our nuclear science. And we keep forgetting to take into account the most important thing, the ethos of the universe, which involves morality, compassion, and courage. These are the essential for creation. So yes, we have to have this balance on both sides of the equation. But energy is always emotion. So we have to take other factors into account. And so as we look at this nuclear connection, we understand the residue from a nuclear explosion are these green crystals. And we found these green crystals in Babylon. And the Babylonian history has 9 levels. They excavated 9 levels down. So we've seen multiple earth upheavals. And in the bottom level, we've seen these Babylonian green crystals. That's not the first or only evidence in our history of a nuclear connection. We've seen these green crystals in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And we also seen them in Hiroshima. Clearly, there's a nuclear connection. And so, as we said, This was December of 2022 when we were reviewing this. And it was a very key time. For us, we launched the cancer awareness. We launched the Christmas plasma flight. And we launched the addiction awareness classes. What time was that? That was December the 18th. That was the fulfillment of the prophecies. Prophecies carried forward for thousands of years, assuming that there would be no change. Well, there was a change. There was an earth upheaval. There were worlds in collision, and there are gravitational changes. And so we talk about in our history the chariots of the gods. Yes, the legendary chariots of fire, the chariots of that in-between space, wherever that is. And so, we like to ask that favorite question, which came first in the beginning, the chicken or the egg? Well, the answer is neither, because you have to have a planet to come to, and then you have to decide where you're going to park your chariot. So we need this landing point, right? So we arrived at this landing point, and then Anu arrived, and then we were enslaved, and then we were washed away, and then the sun played tricks in the sky. Then we were historically modified, and the warmongers always write this history, right? They prevailed, and of course the scholars were deceived. So this history is always based on the physical materialization. And so who are these Anunnakis? Well, they said they came from the planet Nibiru, and there was Daddy Anu and his sons Enki and Enlil, and they had their shields, but then there was also Ra, and he was the architect of the pyramids. He had the shield of the sun, and then there was Hermes, the actual scientist, who his shield was of the pyramids. And see, all of these claimed the superiority. They claimed of being our creators, and they had claims of long life. So the only evidence that we had was this materialism, but there's other evidence, not as enduring, the footprints of the snow. And a good detective will know where you're going or where you came from. And he wants to answer the question, why here? Why here? Why is this our focal point? So we're given a version of history, and that version focuses on what? How can that version of history focus on a divergence of history? Something's missing. Remember the musical chairs game? Less and less chairs, more and more pressure, more players come, they put a lot of pressure. Where does it go? What do you do when you get to the center? Where exactly do you go? You want to look at the physical aspect? And you can't come up with an answer. You come to this pressure point. So we have to understand that there's a dynamic plasma relationship as well. And so from that one field, and let's say it's the sun, gives off a horizontal transmission as part of its sun space field. And so one of those fields is Mercury, and one of those fields is our Earth, and another field is the asteroid belt. But that's just on one side. There's a dynamic plasma relationship on the other side as well. So, which side is the side that's most important? And so, to understand transmutation, we have to understand that there has to be a gravitational stability. That is to say, that there's a transformation and then there's a transportation. The transportation has to do with our earth space, and the transformation has to do with our inner space. Wherever you are, you have to have gravitational stability. And so even when we look at our cell structure, we find there's an inside, there's an outside, and energy comes in and waste goes out. But the waste becomes food for something else. So when we look at energy as charges in motion, we see that there's an emission that's magnetical, there's an absorption that's gravitational. And so this charge is based on the polar energy, which is exemplified by rotation, the speed, and the strength. This indicates a direction. And so we find that the poles are magnetical, the core is gravitational, right? And it's a two-way street. But this energy also goes around this field. And so if it's emitted on one side, which is magnetical, and then it goes to the left and it goes to the right, at that point, it's magnetical. Both sides are magnetical because like poles repel. But on the opposite pole, they get absorbed gravitationally. Well, if the pole is magnetical, how can the magnetical rays be absorbed by the magnetical pole? They have to flip. They have to become gravitational. How do they become gravitational? They become more dense. Where does that energy come from? It comes from another source, not here. And then it converges together. But wait a second. If like poles repel and they're magnetical, if these like poles are gravitational, wouldn't they still repel? Yes, they would, unless there's a magnetical intermediary. So there's a magnetical North Pole and a magnetical South Pole. But they're not in total balance. They are balanced as a field. But the North Pole is stronger than the South Pole. And then that converges into the core. Well, how does that gravitational energy then enter into the core if the core is gravitational? It has to flip again. So we find that even within the charge, there is continual emission and absorption and continual change in the polar energy from magnetical to gravitational. So when we have this maggrav of singularity, really nothing happens, right? You have in magnetic attraction, right? You take two magnets and you put them together, One's magnetical and one's gravitational, right? But let's flip the magnets around and nothing's changed. It's the same magnetic attraction. Still, one is gravitational, one is magnetical, right? Nothing's changed except for the position. But why would the position change? Well, let's look at this slinky toy. And one of our favorite games, of course, is to play with the slinky back and forth between one hand to the other hand, and we say, oh, well, the slinky moves from the left hand to the right hand, so one side is magnetical, one side is gravitational, and then you change it around, and then the other side is magnetical and the other side is gravitational. But then another game that we would play, not just bending the slinky, but flipping it and having it walk down the stairs. Yes, we put the slinky at the top of the stairs and bend it over and let it fall down to the next step. And what happened? It flipped over, and on its own, it carried on to the next stair. And the slinky would flip, step down, flip, step down, flip, step down, and come all the way down the stairs. Yeah, this is what we played with when we were kids. And it was a lot of fun. It's one of the oldest toys, and it's still being produced. So now, when you look at this straight slinky, you don't know which side is magnetical or gravitational. But when you bend it, depending on the motion, you could decide which one's magnetical and which one's gravitational. But if it flips, then the giving side is always magnetical. So the gravitational is in the center of the slinky. It doesn't matter which side is up. What matters is the gravitational component is right in the center. And if the gravitational is at the core, then the magnetical is at both poles. And what a great toy. I didn't know that when I was a kid. And I didn't know that the same thing with the spinning top, isn't it? In order for this top to be standing vertically while it was spinning, it had to have gravitational stability, which means the top of the top was magnetical and the bottom point, which was touching the ground, was also magnetical. And so if we're flipping around that polar axis, we have to find that polar axis point where it's flipping, that flipping point is gravitational. And then we have to realize, wait a second, the top is spinning in one direction, one way. And when it flips over, it's spinning in the other direction, the other way. Maybe this is why in history we see the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. Maybe this is why we see with the pyramid, what we see of the pyramid is above the ground. What we don't see is what's below the ground. Or so we understand. Meaning that the base of the pyramid is gravitational. So are these just footprints in the snow, or are they footprints on the carpet? Are we looking at diamonds? Are we looking at RNA? Are we looking at DNA? Are we looking at chains? Are we understanding the nature of gravitational field strength? Are we understanding the conversion as energies come together? Are we understanding that as energies come to that convergence point is gravitational and every other direction is magnetical? And do we understand it's not just in 2 dimensions, but it's in 3 dimensions? And since you are the observer and you're in none of those 3 dimensions, so you're in the 4th dimension and you are still magnetical because the point of observation is gravitational. So from your point of view, you are gravitational and everything else is magnetical. So now we understand the nuclear connection. We looked at 5 different cycles in our history because we've had multiple Earth upheavals. 5 cycles is 10 gravitational flips. 10 gravitational flips is 9 levels of Babylonian history that's shown the creation of green crystals as it was shown in Hiroshima. But the difference is we are talking about man-made history. Man-made in the 1940s AD. So in the beginning, we've seen the manifestation of the Earth space and its rotation. But that rotation was in one direction. And it was a combination of the hemispheric rotation of the northern and southern hemispheres rotating in opposite directions plasmatically. So this is why we have this sunrise anomaly. So we too have 2 fields. We have a soul and we have a soul of the body. And the physical body is a manifestation of the interaction of those other two fields. So that's our physical body. And we have this earth, this physical earth, which rotates but doesn't walk. But man walks, but he doesn't rotate. Because man is part of the earth in physicality. So now we have to ask ourselves, which way does the sun rotate? Does the sun belong to the man, or does the sun belong to the earth? Right? And does the earth know which way is up? But the earth does know that its gravitational connection is in the core. So everything else is magnetical. So the reason that we're anchored to the earth is because we're gravitational in our physicality. And that gravitational force is attracted to the magnetical force of the Earth. If we can change our polarity, then we can change from attraction to repulsion. So now we understand this principal interaction. It's energy in motion, and it's a two-way street. So when we say the Earth is rotating in a certain direction, is related to the sun. But in which relationship is the sun rotating? And if the sun rotates in another direction, would we rotate in another direction? Or can we suggest that other planets also might rotate in another direction? And that is true. So how can one planet rotate in another direction and yet rotate around the sun in the same direction as the Earth? So we find that the forces of this principal interaction have to take other things into account. And so the only thing that we have to understand in terms of energy is to understand that this is a magnetical feeding that stems from the PM ticks, which are energy packs. And they are divergent right across the universe, but they converge into this plasmagen conversion, which is the amalgamation of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter gen, each of which are at a different energy state. And so we have this principal state, transition state, and this convergence state. These are all part of the maggrav, and the maggrav itself is then gravitational, isn't it? But the maggrav has to have a relationship to something else. And so that relationship is the field interaction, is the feedback inertia. And that is the field of manifestation. So what's a cargo cult? And what does that mean? Well, you see, because these chariots of fire and other big metal eagles have to look for a landing runway, right? We've got these shooting stars, asteroids, and these other belts, but, you know, not only did these chariots of fire look for a landing runway, but so did we. But there was water. Everywhere was water. And, you know, where would you park your chariot if it's all water? So how do you land a big metal eagle in paradise? So, or any place on Earth space, right? Is a chariot of fire or a big metal eagle the same thing? Well, as far as the residents of Papua New Guinea were concerned, yes, they were the cargo cult, right? They lived in paradise, and paradise was a tropical jungle. Well, how do you land a heavy cargo plane in a tropical jungle? So you have to create a landing strip. How do you make the water harder? Well, you create a jungle, but it's still not hard enough. How do you make that jungle floor even harder? With massive quantities of anhydrous ammonia. Anhydrous ammonia is a soil hardener. So hard that you can land these heavy cargo planes. So a parallel subject I want to talk about is grass. Because, see, I was a city boy and I grew up in Toronto. And city boys were smart. And we were home to the largest soccer league in the world. Multicultural community. So we had hundreds of teams. But most of the soccer fields were just dirt. We didn't understand grass, but we were smart city boys, and country boys are stupid, right? So when we looked at farms and we talked about genetic selection, we found that, well, Canadian bull semen is highly regarded and is exported to Germany. And so farmers need to grow food, and farming needs fertilizer. Maybe country boys are smarter than city boys. Yeah. And of course, they use anhydrous ammonia as a fertilizer. Oh, isn't that great? And when it comes in contact with water, it forms an alkali that chemically burns animal tissue, unless it is diluted by large quantities of water. But if it's not diluted by large quantities of water, well, then it becomes a soil hardener. And also, just as an aside, it's a key ingredient in the illegal production of methamphetamines. Illegal drug makers often steal anhydrous ammonia from areas where it is stored or used. Yeah, so it has other uses other than our cargo cult in Papua New Guinea. But before, they had bountiful food production because it was a tropical paradise. But that tropical paradise was lost, you see, because they gained a dependence on these big metal eagles that landed on these hardened runways. And then the crisis developed when the eagles stopped landing. The residents went hungry. They forgot how to grow things. So when we get back to the grassroots, we find that when I was a young boy, there were no minor soccer leagues like today. And we find that this fertilizer is a soil hardener. It affects the water solubility. And this fertilizer then runs off. And so we find the problem with our grassroots is that in Prince Edward Island, for instance, in Canada, we're famous for potatoes, but they've polluted the aquifer. And then in other areas in Canada, we actually inject liquid manure, and we find that in the aquifer as well. So this fertilizer, which we use to help us, is actually polluting our drinking water. And we need the water to water the grass. And so when we can't keep the grass, then we have to replace the grass. We replace it with landscaping, sod grass. We roll up the grass from one place and lay it down in another place. And there's a special skill that you have to understand. You have to put the green side up. And then if it's not flat, then you have to do this top dressing, which is basically spreading more dirt to level it out, assuming that the grass is going to grow through the dirt and give you a new landscape. But then, of course, we have these green lawn tractors. We call them golfers. They get on these golf courses and they create these divots. And why are the divots so pronounced? Is because the roots of the grass don't go deeply. They just curve right back up to the surface. They go down and curve right back up. Why? because that's where the fertilizer is. Hey, the grass isn't stupid. It knows where it gets fed from. It knows which way is up. And so you have grass with shallow roots. Yeah. So there's a relationship between fertilizers and water. And so we see that the fertilizers that are most important are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But if you've ever had a well next to a grass farm, you will be shocked at the high phosphate content. So you could experience a lot of dead fish. You need a water softener or a Kangen water machine. But, you know, if you didn't do things properly, you'd end up with dead grass, dead cows, and dead trees. And then, of course, Africa has this huge problem with nature's gift. They're called water hyacinths. And not only can they be used to feed the fish, but we fertilize the trees. And also, they clean the water of heavy metals. Fabulous plant, nature's gift. And this would have been a wonderful gift for the city of Sudbury, home to the world's largest mine. And of course, shareholders, we talked about shareholders and the value. They sold the mine for money. So it's now owned by Brazil. But there's this creek called Copper Creek. It's so clean, even algae doesn't grow there. In fact, it's a dead creek. But Sudbury is the dandelion capital of the world because the water and the soil is so acidic. And the dandelions, of course, have very deep roots, unlike grass. And these very deep roots go down to gather up calcium. And so when the dandelions decay, they deposit the calcium on top of the soil so that next year the grass will grow better. But we don't get a chance to do that because we cut the dandelions, we mow the grass, and we throw the fertilizer on there. And so every year we get more and more and more dandelions. And now Sudbury is the dandelion capital of the world. What a business. But as you can see, when you let the grass grow its normal way, you don't get so many. And so you get these plasma dandelions. And then this thing is 1 meter tall. Hard to believe. So plants are a natural carbon sink, you see. And so Canada has a lot of forests. And Amazon in Brazil has a lot of forests. They're called the rainforest. But interesting is that Canada is the worst carbon offender. It's a mathematical quirk. And we have too many forest fires. And we have too many floods. So we have this confusion. And, you know, are we having global flooding or are we having global boiling? So we're just a cargo cult in Earth space, you see. And so what we're seeking is food security and agriculture security. This is part of the plasma feeding dimension that we're seeking. So getting back to my grass story, in 1955 in Toronto, I was at Varsity Stadium. And I wasn't knee-high to a grasshopper. I was knee-high to a Scotsman, and I could see all the scars on his knee. And when I looked up, his hair was touching the clouds. And in 1955, we had very lush green grass. And this was home to the greatest Canadian soccer team. The name was Toronto City, a generic name, team of celebrities. And 5,000 fans came in attendance. And that was the biggest team in Canada, and it folded. There were no fans because of the ethnic divisions. 5,000 fans in a stadium that held 25,000 people. And here's that same stadium in 1980, and you can see how poor the grass is. And Toronto's the fourth largest city in North America. And this is right in the heart of Toronto. And here in the heart of Brazil is Maracana Stadium. Holds the record for attendance, 200,000 plus. Their practice field was larger than Varsity Stadium. And last year we held the World Cup in Qatar. And they needed lots of good grass. Yes, they needed it lots, and they needed it lush and had to be green. And Argentina won that World Cup, and here's the Argentina fans celebrating. There's over 4 million fans celebrating that victory. In fact, the crowd was larger than Toronto. This was amazing. An amazing event. But there was another event, very amazing, in 1975 in that Varsity Stadium. And there was great grass and great players. And the stadium of 25,000 was sold out. There was a 35-year-old legend. Big fish in a small pond. And a special strategy was worked out by the home team to facilitate very strict man-to-man marking. But it brought soccer credibility to North America because this legend was on our grass. And he just floated over the grass. And he had a brilliant on-field career. But his brilliance extended off the field as well. And this is what is representative of true greatness. Because Pele was a Brazilian celebrity, hit the field at 17 years, but he became a legend on and off. Not only did he win the World Cup, but he became a world ambassador. That was his greatest field strength. And his message was, we are all equal. We're all one family on this earth space. And that was the message broadcast. And because here we are, we're still looking for that broadcast channel. But it isn't where we came from. It isn't how to land that big medal either. The new question is the genetic question, right? Because this is a genetic cult that is terraformed on terra firma, right? That sentimental pie in the sky, that's me somewhere in between what is not me. And not only what is not me is my neighbor, but is my neighbor's neighbor is not me either. And so where is that? Right? Wherever that is, it's a stable earth space in the stable of the creator's chariots. And how ironic we're talking about in December of 2022, and we talk about a Hawaiian paradise where we see these volcanoes erupting, which are kind of like pimples popping. They're Earth space pimples, and man space has pimples, right? But it's like these volcanoes in Hawaii. It's like Earth space is broadcasting for help on the Earth space emergency broadcast channels, right? Another pimple of paradise in the sea, just like Papua New Guinea. But we had genetic defects, you see, because this was the cultivation gone awry. We were washed away with the great flood and it genetically reseeded. And we have these defects. These are the transmission defects that we got in on our Earth space radio. And we had a broadcast channel and we dialed it in. But when we make our cups of life and we create our fields, we created the perfect environment and the perfect soul. And the earth has its own peace stone. It's a dynamic soul of the earth body. And our earth family is called into this and gravitates to the soul of the earth, that gravitational landing point. This is where the broadcast tower was first established. Then we arrived. Then the sun played tricks. And then the scholars were deceived. So this history, which is based on the physical materialization, forgets that the earth space keeps calling and the man space keeps answering. So when we look at the earth space, it has no radio silence. We are in the biosphere of peace, and the majority seek and will answer the call of freedom and emancipation. It's the universe that's normal. It's the earth that seeks freedom and emancipation, and man's existential crisis defaults to the harvest of the plasma energy of the plasma universe. So we see even today, the earth space is crying. And we see the cargo cult, not big metal eagles, but big metal rolling cargo carriers. In our pursuit of happiness, this is a massive launch field failure because man has never launched a rocket into outer space. 100% of the souls born here preferred the bountifulness of Earth as opposed to Mars. And so now we understand that this dynamic plasma dimension goes beyond the aura. It's a dynamic plasma interaction. And so we see that the feeding radiance, which emits magnetically, converts to this feedback radiance gravitationally. And that converts to another feedback radiance and comes back through the reality dimension gravitationally. It's a two-way street. And it's gravitationally stable. And we're part of this plan. This is the reality dimension. And the proof is that through our preference and sentimentality, we were born. We were born using this outer space system. And we were born into our inner space. And the Earth space was just part of the round trip. It's just one of the target points. So we are inherently peaceful. That's why we got here. But we have to cross this inner space peace bridge because the earth is not ours to destroy. So we have to roll out the gravitational carpet. And we see that the legendary League of Dreams, all residents are welcome, visiting souls. And which reality dimension do these visitors come from? because these are tourists who want to visit heaven, and they prefer the bountifulness of Earth space. So all residents are fields, gravitationally. All residents have souls. All fields have souls. Which reality dimension did we come from? Because we are all equal. And that's a plasma feeding inertia. It's more than just food security. So, yeah, we all live in a yellow submarine, and our Earth space is flooded. Our Earth space is a sea of green. But we began a new program, this new radio transmission, which is broadcast of the Earth space and its transmutation process. And the different colors that we see on this chart are attributes of the non-visible light, where we tune in, turn on, and drop out, so that we can connect with the Creator. The book of excuses was closed. And we have to understand the soul sequencing, where the soul of the sun plus the soul of the earth attracted the soul of man. And the soul of the earth plus the soul of the man attracted the soul of the body. And the soul of the earth plus the soul of the body matches the physical body sequencing, right? And that's part of our feeding. So this is how we come from that dynamic transfer state to this physical destination state. What is that destination state? That destination state is our feedback state. And where exactly is that? So everything has to do with the soul of earth relationships, doesn't it? So if it's in outer space, we have to take into account the soul of the sun as well. But if it's our inner space, then the earth body has to take into account the soul of the earth body. And then the physicality of the earth body has to understand also. That's part of the earth space. So the soul sequencing of the soul of the earth is where the soul of the solar system plus the soul of the sun now attracts the soul of the earth. And the soul of the sun and the soul of the earth attracts the soul of the earth body. So it's the soul of the sun plus the soul of the earth body that manifests itself in the physicality of the earth. Now you have a landing spot. Now we can come. This is where science meets the soul of man, and it's for peace and the universal peace. And now we're in the post-September 22nd of 2022 era, where we have the choices on how we can transmute from outer space to this bountiful space we call Earth space. And we can do it gracefully through our inner space, because that's the soul harvest between the source and the physical reality. And we have two enhancement units, one to enhance the body and one to enhance our material state. And this is how we can facilitate the beauty of the emotion of presence. And so when we're looking at the different types of spaceships, we have to understand that we have different choices of vehicles. And peace is fundamental. It's fundamental for the greater oneness, which we've tried to demonstrate for 570 knowledge seekers workshops every Thursday for every week for 507 weeks, transcending the limitations of nuclear science. so that we understand the difference between the matter plasma that is physical and the matter plasma that is plasmatic, because they represent higher rates of energy transfer and different rates of sensitivity. We are all dynamic plasma beings. So we're moving from the materialization science. This is the new space age. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings of plasma science. Welcome to all the beautiful knowledge seekers. Life's learning lessons transmute your preference and your sentimentality. So there's a world peace treaty that we need to sign, and sign it in earnest, and sign it urgently. With your pen, with your heart, and with your soul. And let the inertia field of peace take over the dilution of emotion that allows the field of life choices free from boundaries or abuse. It's the ethos that maps your position, and the universal community is your travel guide, because the universal community is peaceful. And that energy travels at the speed of love, which manifests and determines your inner space emotional constructs. So the earthbound soul family has a gravitational core, and a gravitational transformation is needed to enhance the physical and emotional vitality and restore it to the emotion of knowledge that brought you here. This was the embodiment of the transmutation connection. And that connection connects equally to the Universal Cosmic Rays Freedom Broadcast channel. This is the Freedom Broadcast of inner space. And the Earth Space broadcast resonates with the proper plasma universe. And so, yes, plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. And so, welcome to the new outer space age. And that's the end of this review. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this class.
Oh, thank you, Alex. What a rich history on this planet. And will we ever be able to decipher the myth, the mystery, and the cataloging of this planet? Maybe we'll be writing some books or something on this, or take some dictation from Mr. Keshe or the universal community, because they seem to have photographed or videotaped this whole choreography or whole event. So maybe we'll make a movie out of this planet at some, but it does have a beautiful, rich history. And probably many do. Many other planets do as well.
Well, we are writing a new history.
Yes, the birth of the new child. And that diversity, of course, as we know, comes from this angle or the inclination, isn't it? Now, I was looking up, and some of them, now I've heard 15% or 5% or 23% to 24%. What is your take on this angle of this planet that caused the seasons, the diversity, and the rest of it?
11%.
11, okay. I didn't see that on the internet.
Well, the 23 comes from the no, it comes from the number of degrees. The what do they call that? Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. Okay. Is 23 degrees from the equator.
Yeah, there were so many different drawings there. I just went and searched it, and I was wondering, because I know some people said 5, some people said 15. You're saying 11.
Well, 5 is a multiple, and you double that, it's 11. Double that is 23. Okay. And it's and so you look at the the movement of the sun in relationship to the earth. You find it in the northern hemisphere, it goes up 23 degrees in the summer, and then in the southern hemisphere, in the it goes 23 degrees south of the pole, right? So that's 46 altogether, and 46 is half of 90 degrees, you know. So, but there's a wobble. Okay, so these are not prime numbers. There's a continual wobble that's going back, but then there's also a rotation that goes around the axis, you see. So, you know, when it wobbles 11 degrees on one side and then it rotates, it wobbles 11 degrees on the other side too. So, 11 is kind of around 23. It's 22, 23. So this is the math, but every time we go from a flat rotation to a spherical rotation, we always have to introduce this pi. And pi is not a fixed number. We always kind of fudge it and we say, well, it's 3.14. Yeah, but plus plus plus, it's not exactly 3.14. So, and so we get used to fudging things, right? So you sell me something for $100 and I give you $95 and say, well, it's close, but I shortchange you for $5. So, but there's people who make a career out of that 5%, right?
Sure, they certainly do. Is there anyone who'd like to raise a point, ask a question, take an exception? I think I was looking at something last night, Alex. They were saying the Sphinx is not even part of the dynasties of Egypt. Way, way before even the pharaohs arrived. It's probably been recarved at least once. But they were talking 50,000 years old, and they went into a little bit of the water erosion. So the history of this planet is quite, and I know Mr. Kesh said it's much older than we even realize. They keep digging things up in Italy and Russia and all over the place. Sometimes these highway projects are actually good for that in Florida and so on, or building a new building, and all of a sudden they come up with some sort of archaeology and help us to
Yeah, but
understand.
the pyramids have a very precise date, and the reason for that is because all through history, when an architect builds a building, he places a cornerstone, and historically that cornerstone was an emblem of the zodiac signs.
Yeah, they were just differentiating between the Sphinx and the pyramids. Totally different groups were involved.
Yeah, but it's not a human head on a frog. Okay, there is no frog in the zodiac thing, so it's either a ram or a bull,
Or a lion.
or a lion.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that was
Okay.
what they were saying on the one program I happened to look at.
Yeah. So the Sphinx is a cornerstone, but who would put their head on a cornerstone? Someone who is very egocentric, right? So we now know that that was vandalism. We know that the hieroglyphics on all the monuments were vandalism, right? This is, the ancient form of tagging. But in the ancient times, the peasants wouldn't do the tagging because they would be uh, enslaved and imprisoned and then probably executed. So the only person who was allowed to desecrate the monuments was the ruler. But in our modern times, we have there's the street people doing all the tagging. The street gangs, they put their logos on to designate their territory, if you will.
I guess they
But
had executive orders back then too. To
yeah,
change
exactly. But this is how it's changed, and so what? Yeah, but what has changed? What has changed? The rules haven't changed. The oppressors are still ruling.
Yeah, I think Mr. Kesh went through that in so many ways.
Yeah.
The
So,
real,
but we don't get all our knowledge from Mr. Kesh, and so when you look at the libraries and what's going on in Canada right now, they are, you know, eliminating books that were written before 2008 in our libraries. Who attacks libraries? Who does that? Someone who wants to obfuscate history. And why do we want to do that? Just so we can make the same mistakes over again, right?
yeah, I was surprised to hear sewer water going into the aquifers. Gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, I
no.
know. We don't even know the half of it, I'm sure, but that's why the technology will prevail and it'll bring the change. Probably much faster than we caused all the problems. That's our wish and command. That we get out. We've been stuck in a rut since the beginning almost. And not only us, I think the whole universe is going through again this remodeling process. The creator, I don't think he took a loan, but he's certainly giving a gift to all of us and all of creation.
Well, that's what we have to understand. We have to understand the limitations of our Earth space. This is just a small speck in the rest of the
Yeah,
universe. We
speck
we
of
need
dust
to
in the corner of a universe.
broaden our horizons.
Mhm.
That's right. That's right.
But
So
it was an insignificant speck of dust. Now it's going to become more of a significant speck of dust, I think. And the universal community realizes that. So they're ready to welcome us in, and hopefully more and more of us will be welcoming them to interact with us on an open basis rather than.
yeah, but why is that, Mark? See, like a clear thinker would arrive at a solution. So why is the Earth space so important? You know, and is it important when we have been told that we're inferior? Extraterrestrials are superior, right? We've been told that. Well, here it is. We found that on December the 18th, we had visitors wanting to come. Why do visitors want to come? Aren't we the visitors? We came. How come other visitors can't come the way we came?
Not sure.
That's the first question.
Not sure, but I know they have passed the videos around in the universal community, and this is kind of the Wild West. Even though it's beautiful, it can also be dangerous for peaceful creatures.
Yeah, for sure. But you came here, right? Well, these visitors can't come here the way you came here. All right. So what does that mean? That means that this is a special feature. The materialization in the physicality is a special feature. See, the Earth space was here before we came. So that special feature was available to the Earth space. It wasn't until the Earth space materialized that we could materialize in physicality. But these other visitors cannot materialize. They are coming through the enhancement units also. This is a revelation. This was news to me. I never thought that, universal visitors would have to use a universal body enhancement unit to visit Earth. I thought that they were superior in that regard. So we're superior in that regard. But when we say superior, we're talking about a talent, a skill. And so we have that skill and we don't respect that.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe they don't realize there's beauty in this dimension as well. And as he said, you can go up the ladder, but coming down the ladder is a little bit perhaps more difficult. But yet there's beauties in both dimensions. This is what the whole creation is probably going to find out.
But that's the second point. Then they want to visit beauty. It's just because, we keep messing it up. We came here because of the beauty. They want to come here because of the beauty. Then they're not coming here because of the mess that we're creating. They're coming here to enjoy the beauty. That's another revelation.
Yeah, see another aspect of the creation. And that's why tourism, I think, will be quite popular in the coming.
Yeah, but that tourism is limited in range because this, genetic defect that we have has been purposely contained. All right. And this is, we have come to the crossroads. We can now correct this with the plasma science.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, not only do we correct it on Earth space, but any other space, so that will become the same characteristic as the universal community space, which is that of peace. It cannot spread without the peace. Okay, it cannot. That's the problem. It's the limitation. Without peace, it can't work, because the moment you have a lack of peace, you have a lack of a major source of energy, and it automatically becomes a minor source of energy, and at that point it becomes diminishing. This is the history lesson.
Very good. Randy has said the positive pole of a planet is defined by the right hand rule. If the fingers of the right hand are curled in the direction of the rotation, then the thumb points to the positive pole. The axis tilt is defined as the angle between the direction of the positive pole and the normal to the orbital plane. The angles from Earth, Uranus, and Venus are approximately 23, 97, and 177 degrees, respectively. Randy, can you explain yourself?
Well, I just Googled what is the axis of Earth, and that's what I came up with. So the question would be, if we're existing in the physicality at 23 degrees, what type of being is existing at 97 and 177?
Maybe we're going to find out.
And is this, like you said earlier, is this why space tourism to this planet to see the beauty is going to come from the other planets? We don't know. Maybe we're going to have to go visit, see what's there.
This will also come from here to see the beauty of the creation and
exactly
what the Creator has developed. And we may make a number of friends along the way. I mean, you won't just have your neighbor. You may have someone in another galaxy, another universe that you can interact with. Yeah, so I think the whole thing is opening up more and more. Anyone else? Or Randy, Alex, I know Randy has submitted a few pictures on zinc and so on. I don't know if you want to go into that, but if we, are there any questions anyone would like to propose or thoughts they'd like to share. Well, that's fine. I'm sure they're contemplating a lot of what's been said. There is so much, as Mr. Kesh said, it become a master at this takes a long, long time, and there's just so many things to consider in so many ways. I think we'll have the capacity for it. We'll have the understanding of it, and we're going to certainly share it. So there's much more work to do, but we have to sort of go through our basic boot camp in a way and straighten this situation out with the help of the technology, which I think will be more and more people become aware of it and want to use it. Even the ones that don't want to accept it, as he said, they're not going to accept this technology out of the love of it, but out of the fear of their own demise. I was thinking of, important scientists or world leaders who say have kidney failure, dialysis isn't working. They hear of this technology, but they don't really want to accept it, but they have to accept it out of the fear of their own demise. And then they'll become quite a strong asset. I think Mr. Kesh had indicated in the past. Some of these ones, we won't mention any particular names, but once they sort of flip the pole or have the soul elevated, they're going to be quite strong proponents of promotion of this technology. They'll become an asset to the work. So again, that's why we're not putting anyone in jail or judging them for their past works, but it's just the elevation of the soul. So then they can show their beauty, as you see with the plants and so on. I went back to the, is there something you want to say about these containers, these trucks?
Do you know where this is?
No, I don't know. No, oh, I see a flag. Is this the Iranian flag?
No, it's the Egyptian flag.
Okay. Oh, this is trying to get aid into Gaza?
At this moment, yeah.
At this moment, yeah. Yeah, amazing. And it was nice that now that question at 1 hour 29 minutes that Mr. Kesh answered has been put into the smartphone version by someone who's very adept with these computers and so on. So if you can forward it to any, I know some people that I'm going to share it with, but with the phone, if you start to circulate it around certain communities, I think they will get enlightened by the words of Mr. Kesh and what's been spoken here and what needs to be done. And it is a one-state solution, as we were looking at in the actual text. Another thing that was very interesting about Musk, if I could share the screen and you can take it back momentarily. Let me see if I can share the screen and we'll bring up.
You go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bring up the transcript again. And one of the points that was brought, he talks about, this is on the patents, levitating with the magrevs in the car. This is on the hovering car. And if you go on the Pictures Kesh Foundation, this is not something new. As I say, Musk and his team are literally listen to every word of the teachings on Kesh Foundation. They don't miss anything because we see them in the research and what they do and how the thing's done, because it gives them an insight, a way to do things. And they study every single page ever released by Kesh Foundation. The Musk Group are literally sitting on top. And of course, we're not the only one. He said, we are not the only one. They sit on every technological group to see what they can get, what they can bring in. And here's the point. And you saw them launching that small MagRav energy saving unit, and it didn't go anywhere. When you steal, it does not go far. It shows a few pieces. And this is the habit which he's taken. But he's invited openly to be there, or he'll be invited openly to be there. And we'll see how things take shape. So him and his team may, again, is anyone familiar with a small MagRav energy saving unit that they launched? It's not the wall batteries, I don't believe. I know they have these batteries that you can put in the home and they'll last for a week or something like that. But anyone familiar with this small MagRav energy saving unit that they tried to launch, or that they did launch? Never even heard of it. When you steal, it doesn't go far. Then, of course, there was another part, I think, if we back it up, about these weaker fields, working with the plasma. I guess we work with the stronger fields in the matter state, but much weaker fields in the plasma state, and these are the fields of the creator. Let's see if we can just get back to that. I think it's 1 hour. And about the, yeah, here. Yeah. Yeah, this was very interesting about the bigness of things, and we're always looking for the bigger and stronger. The shape, the dimension, the direction of the fields of the unicos will dictate us, will show us the way to our creator, to the central point. This is how the humanity has to extend his knowledge, extend his understanding of, expand his process of knowledge gaining through the weaker fields of the universe. If he works with the plasma and not through this massive, everything has to be big, because when it's big, it creates power and you'll be frightened of it. God, your creator, comes to you through the weakest strengths of the fields, and you don't even know it because you're looking for him to be so big. That's why he's in every cell, every existence, every thought of you, because you have not learned not to be physical, not to look at the biggest thing. I always said, when you go to the communist countries like Russia, when you go to places like the churches and the mosques, you go to the offices of the government, they make it so big. And then I was thinking of the what I saw in Egypt, what they, 1,000-ton blocks carved into a statue of the ruler, so big. You've seen them in front of the temples and so on, to make you feel so puny, so small, you have no power. So when you go to the office, they make it so big that you live in a tiny house. So this thing big must be very important. Fear of size, not knowing there is no soul in any of these buildings, not even in the churches or the mosque, because the strength of creation comes from the smallest, the essence of common denominator of life in the universe. So just another point to consider, the love of the mother comes from those small caresses of touch, not from the heavy hugs and slaps. Okay, Alex, if you want to pull that back. No problem. And if we don't have any questions, that's fine as well, but we're hoping to hear from someone who would like to share something. And you don't have to be correct. Again, Mr. Kesh knows that we don't know an awful lot, but he likes that we're determined to know more and to try to understand more and to continue on this journey until we reach a better understanding of this whole process of totality. He said we've misinterpreted the totality. We've misunderstood it. And I think that was a great lesson for the soul being created into the full sphere dynamic, which allows the transmutation to happen much more easily. Anything you'd like to say about those pictures, Randy, that you shared?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Let's see, which one would you like me to bring up? This was the first one that I had downloaded. That was, I think you posted that a number of days ago, wasn't it?
I don't recall the date, but
Okay.
I know I sent you some today.
Yeah, that was on, it looks like, what does it say there, 10:15? Okay, that was, maybe that was a duplicate, but I thought I saw it before today. Today is the 15th of October, isn't it? No. This is your zinc.
You'll have to take the screen back.
Oh, sorry. And Alex, feel free to, of course, comment, chime in. There we
I'm
go.
going to stop.
We
Yeah.
got it.
Okay, this is the production of the zinc.
Okay.
And the next picture, the problem is I couldn't find zinc wire locally. So what I did find though was 1 ounce zinc 999 pure bullion bars. But when you did like that, but when you have to have the zinc connection as zinc wire. So I melted the bar down and poured my own size wire and then nano coated it. I melted one of these bars down, like that, exactly. Then I filed it down to fit the holder I have, put a hole in the zinc, took the torch and made a hook in it so you could hang the zinc. And I'll advise anyone, do not buy the zinc foil plates on Amazon. They are not zinc. So I melted one down and there's maybe 80% zinc. The rest is just crap. So in this picture, you'll see the nano-coated zinc with the little bars I made. And then I hooked it up and place that over into the beaker and make ZNO. So those other pictures are the production that will produce about 400 milliliters of nice zinc GANs overnight with running DC power supply.
And were you making it for any specific?
I made it because I listened to the 20-second Knowledge Seekers workshop where Mr. Kesh talks about he was having problems with his eyes and he made a CO2 and a zinc GANs. So I thought, okay, I've always had problems with my eyes. So I'm going to make this GANs. I'm going to do it very, very exactly, measure it so that the percentage of salt is exactly at 9%, which when I figured out, I think someone said that's the salinity of the human body. And then I made this into 1 liter and I would let this go. And the interesting thing about this is normally it takes 5 or 6 washes to wash the salt out. Using this method and using the DC power supply, 3 washes will wash all the salt out.
Wow,
and I have tried.
What is this square here?
That's the zinc.
Oh no, this is the label on the beaker.
That's the label. That's the label on the beaker.
Okay. I was
a label on
wondering,
the
I'm
beaker.
saying, gee, it looks like it's in the water. Then it just dawned on me that maybe something they
that's-
write on.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. Now,
So the thing is, I've
have-
tried these drops already, and you really feel when you put the CO2 in, you really feel the electrical, at least I do, of the hookup. Then you wait 5 minutes. I put the zinc in. Immediately when you put the zinc drops in the eyes, the field of light increases. It allows more light into the eyes. That's the thing that I noticed.
Now, you used to have, were you working in Thailand before with wellness centers?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And that's when I started to look into the Kesh Foundation, because another knowledge seeker, I was conversing with them by email, and they said, well, you better look at the Kesh Foundation for the work that you're doing. So unknown to me at the time, we were working with monoatomic gold and all sorts of different things and making things out of the sea. And we were there, but not understanding what we're doing. Then when I got into the Kesh, I said, oh boy, this is something totally new I'd like to put into what we're doing.
Right, and you
And then
probably still have some contacts with doctors and things over there?
no,
No.
when we closed the place, we just shut everything right down. COVID literally stopped us in our tracks because we relied on the tourists.
Yeah.
So when the COVID hit, that was it. The tourism went to zero.
Could
So
I
we
add
just
two things? Your eyesight depends not so much on your eyeball, if not on the nervous system that goes from your eyeball to your brain. And the zinc works on your emotional side.
Yes, that's the one thing Mr. Kesh said in that workshop.
Yeah.
And then when I found out in
9%, sorry.
Go ahead, John, sorry.
9% of the salt is the sea salt. The sea has 9%. Our bodies have 3%.
Okay, 3%. I
What
didn't know that.
percent
Thank
did
you.
you use in this one, Randy?
9%.
9. Yeah, I don't know if we have, I thought the sea had the 4%. Maybe, no, I could be wrong. I'm maybe thinking of something else. But you're playing with this with CO2 in combination.
Yes, you make a batch of CO2 and then you make a batch of ZNO. And I have different little dropper bottles for that.
The other thing I can add,
Go ahead,
sorry, for over 20 years, I've used argans in my eyesight every morning. The eye cup.
The natural GANs.
Exactly. The yellow one.
Like milk is the GANs from the cow and honey would be a GANs from the bees.
And that I've recuperated my eyesight 50% or more.
Well, it's interesting. The reason I did this is because in 2016, I went to an eye clinic where all they did was eyes. They've been there around 10 or 15 years. And my vision was getting poor, it was a little cloudy, and I couldn't see properly. And then I got all the tests done, and the lady said, well, basically, you have cataract so bad, I should really declare you blind. And I said, okay. So I did all the stuff and did all the research. And before I went there, I looked at every single machine they were going to use. So I had lots of questions. Then I decided, okay, let's try this GANs thing. And I started to use just the cup 1 in my eyes. Just the cup 1. I did that. And then when I come back to Canada to get the cataract things all done, again, the doctors did even more tests. And then I said, well, I can see though. He said, well, but according to our machines, you can't see. I said, but I can. So going back to what Irmgard said earlier, our bodies adjust to different things earlier. So my sense of hearing was always sharp. My sense of smell was always sharp because I've had poor vision all my life. So when you understand that it's just the body and the soul communicating, that to bring you aware, and those sharpnesses are still there. When I was in the automotive field, I would do a lot of tuning in a car by what I felt by riding in it and by listening and hearing. So the body is a marvelous machine to adapt. So as we go along in this journey of discovery of the plasmatic universal fields and us, I think it's even going to get wilder what we discover.
Yeah, you may try to find Santi in Uruguay. He's done some work on his eyes. I think he lost his glasses. And I'm not sure exactly what he used, but it might have been CO2 in combination with something else. But I've heard his testimony, how I believe it was Santi who said he doesn't wear glasses anymore. and he improved his vision. But think about melting the calcium. Now, aren't cataracts a type of calcium formed in the eye, or is that something different?
I think, well, that's a good question. I was told it's too much protein.
Okay, well, and so if they can melt kidney stones from thousands of kilometers away, wouldn't they be able to melt cataracts as well? I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I
that's
think
why,
this is the thing that we're going to discover once we get these universal engine machines
yeah,
all over the world and up and running, is there's going to be some massive changes.
yeah,
Just take a look at October 27th. Who knows what's going to happen when that system gets turned on for the corona?
I am not sure what you're referring to.
You referred to earlier on October 27th, there's going to be one of the creator.
Oh, you mean the okay, the long COVID or the
right.
hanging on, yeah, of what he said, October 27th. And that
Yes.
was, I think, in the store. And let's just take
Yeah, you showed that earlier.
look at that. Let's see if we can find that again. I'm sure it's right here, but it may not be on this particular page. New release products, perhaps. Okay, yeah, here. Okay, now I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the post-corona soul and soul of physicality interaction, October 27th. And that's the machine you're talking about turning on in a way.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, apparently a lot of people have some heart issues, lung issues, teeth issues, and other things. And this is what he's saying. This will be the first time that we try to bring interaction between the soul and soul of physicality to bring the conditions which post-coronavirus has created for many for their wellness. Yeah. And again, these are going through tests. People will receive something in these sessions, but it's also really to perfect the larger system. As you said, once that gets enabled and people start working with it, but that's what these smaller monthly sessions are doing. You receive something sometimes. You may not receive anything, but sometimes you do. But it's to perfect the wellness system, which of course we showed in the beginning of the workshop. This system here is being perfected, and the doctors have been using it and quite successfully over the past year. But this is the first time just a number of weeks ago that we've actually seen, and they'll produce many of these, I think. Maybe not. I know he talked about one central system. So, but we know there's a wellness system in Germany, I think, and there'll probably be some other ones spread along the way. And then, of course, with the head units coming out and so on, they'll have more access. Everyone will have more access. And then they'll probably be producing them, as I say, out of China quite very reasonably. Okay, anyone else want to share anything? Thank you, Randy, for sharing your work. Any other comments you'd like to bring? So don't get the plates on Amazon, huh?
No, don't. They advertise zinc foil plates. So
Yeah.
I thought, I'm going to take one of these plates and I'm going to put it in my little crucible and I'm going to melt it down. And I should have got a little nice puddle of zinc, but I got probably 70% garbage and 30% zinc. So
yeah.
If you can find these, if you can buy bullion bars like this, they're a little expensive. They're about $25 a piece, but the purity is there.
Right. And that is important. Every little different element makes a huge difference in the interaction of fields.
You also get very good zinc from the old carbon zinc batteries. They have to be pure zinc, if not, the batteries just are useless.
Yeah, I've never found any of those in my spheres. They're all the steel ones. When you put the magnet on them, they connect right away.
Now, while the steel is what covers
The
the
case,
zinc,
okay.
you got to take, yeah, exactly. You got to take the
Take the
steel
case
off,
off. Mhm.
and you got the zinc there.
Okay.
You take all the carbon, acid carbon from inside, and the carbon rod, clean it up, cut it the way you want it into a wire or plate. And that's all the production of my GANs was done with those.
Okay.
Because I couldn't get hold of zinc here where I am. I had to wait for months till I got some from Buenos Aires.
Well, okay, any other questions, or we'll bring this session
Yeah.
to a close?
And
Ellen?
the ironic thing is, I used to work in a galvanizing plant, belonged to my father. And we had 35 kilogram lingots of zinc, pure zinc there. We used to use them by the hundreds.
Okay, this is a video Lisa has put together. Again, it was Mr. Kesh sort of used this as a jumping off point. Rick always seems to know what videos to play, or maybe he's influencing what Mr. Kesh is talking about. But Mr. Kesh said Rick always knows in a way. I guess the souls are communicating, reaching a balance of our soul, emotion, and physicality. And that's what was sharing with the charts and so on, about this single line where the soul, the physicality, and the soul of physicality is basically all equal. And this is a very important aspect, I think, for us.